You ready to go? Okay, let's go then. Welcome to part 2 of the How to Respond to Hard Things. I'm Reverend Mary, she, her pronouns, and I'm joined by Reverend Sara to have some discussion. And just so folks know, we are streaming to Zoom and YouTube, and we are recording this to be posted on the OUC website later. We'll begin by lighting a chalice, because that's what we do as Unitarian Universalists. These words are from the Reverend Deanna Vandeveer. As we light a chalice, a container of air, earth, and fire, this ritual of our faith reminds our subtle and crushing about beings that we are part of a collective, a community of care and connection, courage and questions, scared and sacred together. Today we gather with intention and creativity, releasing what we must, shaping what we will, in a space made possible by generations of community care and the courage of connection. So my purpose here at the beginning is to just give a short introduction to what we're trying to do here and a summary of what we did in our first forum, which was on February 1st. The purpose of these forums is to help prepare us to be with and respond to hard things, because there's an awful lot of hard things right now in our larger world, in our community, and in our personal lives. So on February 1st, in part 1, we offered some ways to think about hard things and some frameworks and self-care for healing. And we began with the idea that hurt people, and healing people heal people. And so we want to focus on how we tend to ourselves first so that we can be healing people, knowing that we all have some hurt. And so we started with the Buddhist story of 2 arrows or darts. And the idea is that the first arrow or dart in our lives is the unavoidable pain. There are hard things that happen in our lives that we have no control over. And some might call that clean pain. And then the second arrow or dart is the things that we do and our reaction to that unavoidable pain that can make it even more painful. And examples are when we are unaware of what's happening, or when we deny, when we use spiritual bypass or spiritual thinking or practices in order to get around the work we need to do, or when we identify with a hard thing and make it about ourselves instead of the others who are around us. And so we talked about how much of the time we kind of go through the world unaware and without our internal brakes in place. And so we have to be intentional and have practices to help us be more aware and to help us pause. And so Reverend Sara talked about, Carbon, if we could advance the slides a couple, and one more, there we go. So self-awareness is when we are aware of ourselves and who we are. Our self-regulation is our ability to calm ourselves when our body is activated, because our bodies get activated, so that we can be more self-aware and that we can use our brain to respond well. When our body's activated, our dinosaur brain is activated, and we're not using our best thinking at that point. So self-regulation is a way to try to calm our body so that we can access our brain and use it in productive ways. And we also talked about the idea of co-regulation. Because we are social beings and because we are interconnected and interdependent, how we are showing up in the world, whether calm or activated, is going to affect the people who are around us. And so if we can be self-aware and help to calm ourselves when we're activated, because everybody gets activated, if we can calm ourselves, we can help calm the people who are around us. And so we talked about some ways that we can pause long enough, increase the pause to be able to calm our bodies and so our minds. And it's things like just experience what you're experiencing, and then identify and release the feelings as best you can. So soothe yourself, heal yourself. And that might be things like breathing. There's a reason I invite us to breathe a lot in our Sunday service. Some people find that if you just lower your shoulders intentionally, it begins to help you relax your body. I don't know about you, but I notice that sometimes my shoulders are about right here by the end of the day, and lowering them can help. Lowering your voice instead of higher, and then grounding yourself in whatever way you might find to do that, whether that's meditation or literally going out to touch the earth and ground. And so all the ways that we can expand our tools to be able to calm ourselves is good. That might be worship, it might be counseling, it might be spiritual direction, spiritual practices, and going out in nature. And then the last thing, so this is Viktor Frankl's quote about there is a space. It's not very long, it doesn't seem long between stimulus and response, but all that we can do to make that pause as big as possible so that we have a choice about how we respond instead of an automatic response. And then the last thing that we talked about in February was ring theory. And this is the idea that we want to put someone who is struggling at the center, and that there are rings of people around them, their most immediate friends and family, their community, their church, out into the world. And the idea is that when we're trying to be supportive, we put support into the circle and we dump out. So when someone is struggling, it can activate things in us. And we might be thinking things like, well, they shouldn't have smoked for 40 years. Or, they shouldn't have been driving while they were impaired. Or, any number of judgments that we might have, and those are normal, natural things. The idea of ring theory is that's not what you say to the person who's in the center struggling, right? You can think it. What you want to do is have supportive statements go to them, and if you need to vent or share your judgment, you share it with somebody else further out from the center, from the circle, right? So natural and normal judgments are what happens in our human brains. What comes out of our mouth, we have some control over. And that's the energy and the spaciousness that we're looking for between our stimulus and our response. Is that making sense about what we covered? Do you have any questions at this point of anything that we talked about in February?
Is it getting closer to you? Closer. More. Is it closer? Yep. Now can you hear? Okay. Anyway, by the rings, what people would you be talking about? Suppose somebody, I don't know, has a heart attack or something, and they ate a lot of I don't know what, but fried chicken. And I'm not blaming him for eating fried chicken, but what do I say, except that I hope you heal and get better fast, but that seems kind of lame. I don't know.
Well, what a great question, Dot. And we're going to, Reverend Sara and I are going to talk about some specific situations that we tend to encounter in a faith community and what we can say and do that would be supportive. The idea of the rings is, person who is suffering or needs support in the center, and then right around them is usually family, friends, their most immediate circle. Then there's a circle out, that's their community, maybe their faith community. Then there's the larger community like Olympia, and then, it gets bigger. So when you do need to complain, you want to be as far away from the center as possible, right? So you might, if you have grumbling, you might want to talk to somebody in the congregation, or you might want to go even further out beyond the congregation to, a neighbor or a larger community And so there are things that you can say that are supportive and things you can do, and then we'll talk about those.
Well, one example I have right now, which is bothering me, a person recently died who had severe dementia. Actually, they were a vegetable almost, and she recently passed away. Her family has had a private, but I don't know exactly. I know that I'm going to meet them sooner or later. I don't know exactly what to say. I'm sorry, but, they really had already lost her a few years back. And I know that, but I can't say something like that, I don't think. I don't know what to say.
So sometimes what you can say is, I'm sorry for the loss.
Yeah.
And that's all you have to say. And they may not want to talk anymore about what happened.
Yeah.
You might want to talk more, which means you need to find somebody else to talk to.
Yeah, okay.
They might not want to talk about it.
And that's true. I don't know. I haven't seen him since the event, so,
That's right.
yeah. But
Yep.
thank you.
Sure. Carbon, is there anybody online who has a question or something they want to check on? Over to you, Reverend Sara.
All right, so if we can move forward one slide, Carbon. The other thing that is a bit of review is that a couple weeks ago, I did a forum on self and community care. And this also relates to how to respond to hard things. And for this topic and for this forum, I made this Venn diagram. So a Venn diagram is a way of organizing to show the overlaps between related concepts. And so what is in the self-care circle are things that you probably recognize, like resting, therapy, exercise, eating well, meditating, hobbies, and addictions recovery. Those are all good ways to take care of yourself. And any way that you take care of yourself increases your capacity to take care of others. It increases that pause that we were talking about where you're less reactive. So self-care is important not just for yourself, although we don't need to justify why we take care of ourselves as being good for others. And then community care are ways that the community takes care of one another. And over there, we have things like community meals, mutual aid, healing and discussion circles, advocating for others, public transit and other services, and relationship and trust building. And an example of community care here at OUC is the Caring Friends list. So when something hard happens for a person, they may reach out for practical help, things like a meal train or rides or pet sitting. And that is an example of community care that we provide for one another. But in the overlap, where self and community care are both happening, and these words are a little smaller because I had to squeeze a lot of things into that center overlap, but it's letting yourself be cared for. And Tiffany's testimonial this morning talked about that a little bit, that we're raised with this idea of individualism, and it can be hard to let yourself be cared for if you have an ideal of individualism. But in our interdependent community care, it's actually good for you and for others that you let yourself be cared for. And then practicing healthy boundaries is also in the overlap, because that's both self-care and community care. When we practice healthy boundaries, other people know that if they say yes to an offer of help that we've made, they're not going to overextend us because we have good, healthy boundaries. We won't offer more than we have to give, or we'll say no if we need to. And then practicing accountability and repair. So when there is an ouch, when we do something that inadvertently hurts another person, We take accountability and we make repair, and that's part of our covenant, which was the whole point of today's service. So right there it is, right there. So when we're looking at how we respond to hard things in our community, keeping in mind this self and community care can really help us be equipped. All right. Oh, I guess I should pause and say, any questions? All right, moving right along.
So the Gottmans were psychologists who did a lot of study of couples and relationships. And they came up with this idea that there tends to be, in general, 3 ways that we respond to each other. We move toward, we move away, or we move against. And this can be a really helpful model for being self-aware and knowing how we tend to respond. So moving toward means that we engage with someone. And in the context of being with someone when things are hard, one of the challenges we have about moving toward is that we can move in too much. We can overcare, we can overcomfort, we can take control away from the other person. And we can protect them when it's really not needed. We can want to protect them when they don't really need protection, and so disempower them. And so, so that's moving toward. It can be a really positive thing, and it can be a really challenging thing. There is also a tendency sometimes to move away, which means when things are hard, we ignore, we withdraw, we minimize, we go quiet, right? And then there's the moving against, which is we question, well, why did this happen? What happened here? We analyze, we go to our brain instead of our heart, if you will. We defend. We might defend ourselves, we might defend somebody else. We argue, we explain, those kinds of things. And so just as an example of this, I know that when somebody is hurting, I go toward. And I also know that there are times when that's not helpful, right? So just today, I heard from someone that they had a loss in their family this week. They were here this morning. My impulse when I saw them was, oh my gosh, how are you? And yet, so I had to notice that, take a step back. I went to them and I said, I'm so glad you're here today. And that gave them the option of, do they want to talk or not? What do they want to say? And they looked at me and they said, I am too. Done, right? So I needed to notice my impulse to swoop in and offer care and protection and such. That's not what they wanted or needed from me. They needed to be seen, and I could see them, right? Is that making sense? So it's really, and I know that there are situations where I tend to move away. Everybody has some conflict avoidance. I certainly do as well. There are other times when my brain kicks in as a defense and I want to argue or defend or analyze. So it can be really helpful for us to know what's our impulse, what's kind of our natural inclination in particular situations. Any questions about that or any comments to make about this? Mm-hmm.
Well, it's very helpful, and it's a bit concerning because it looks like there's a whole bunch of things you can do, and only one of them is like helpful, and all the other things can be less helpful. So, but it's good to be aware of what people need and to realize, okay, what I feel like doing isn't necessarily what is helpful to them.
Right. Well, and I guess I'll say there are times when analysis is helpful, right? And so, and there are times when taking a step back to have a bit of a pause to engage with something later, that might be a helpful strategy too. These are strategies, right? It's a matter of discerning what's my inclination. Is this the right thing right now? Would this be helpful for me, and would this be helpful for the people around me? So I think some of it is just noticing these 3 ways of engaging with some grace and some spaciousness for, yep, there's times when each of these might actually be helpful.
Are these available anywhere, like on the website, these strategies?
We're going to have this recording of this forum on the OUC website, and it's on our YouTube channel. Are you wanting
I'm
these?
more interested in the
these-
listing, like, I'm a reader, so I think of it as a hard copy, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay, so Carol, if you go to a web browser, a search engine, and you put in toward, away, and against, it'll get you there. Anything else?
Are there any online, Carbon? No? Okay. All right, well, we are going to talk through some scenarios now. And so this will be a little bit more interactive. So if you've got a thought or a question at any point as I talk about a scenario, go ahead and raise your hand. If you are on Zoom, you can raise your digital hand, or you can put something in the chat, and Carbon will pass that along to us here in the room. So we're going to talk, we may or may not get through all of these scenarios, but I'm going to start with health and mental health issues, and then we'll talk about death, and if we have time, we'll get to economic hardship. So these are just some of the hard things that you might be responding to. We brainstormed more than this when we were thinking of other hard things, but there's not time to go over all of them today. So the first thing is for health issues and concerns. There's known and seen health concerns, and there's unknown and invisible health concerns. So the first that I want to talk about is the invisible, the unknown, you're not quite sure what's going on. And if I could have the next slide, Carbon. So this text is very small, but we're going to talk about it. So if you can't read it, I'm going to read them out loud. But the first thing to do is backing back to those tendencies, knowing yourself and your tendencies. So do you tend to go toward, away, or against? Not that any of those is always right or wrong, but knowing yourself is this part of self-awareness, so you know how to approach. And then I would invite you to notice what you're noticing and question your assumptions. So what sort of things do we notice that lead us to think that somebody is having a health concern? What are the noticings? Tears. Yeah, somebody might seem emotional. Physical struggle. Somebody might seem to be physically struggling. What are the assumptions that we're making around tears? Sadness. We're assuming that a person is sad or that they're hurt. What else might be that besides that assumption? They could be angry. Yes. Yeah, it could be that it's not sorrow, that it's anger. Quite a few people express anger through tears, actually. Yeah.
They could be moved.
They could be moved. Yes. It's so beautiful. I'm weeping with joy. Yeah, so that's just one example of how we may jump to one conclusion, but we should stop, pause, question our assumptions. What are we noticing? What are we assuming based on that noticing? And then avoid objectifying or commenting on people's bodies. So this is one of those, can anyone think of an unhelpful noticing that we might lift up about somebody else's body that is not a helpful way to approach it?
Oh, are you losing weight?
Oh, are you losing weight? Yes. Yeah. Oh, are you losing weight? There's a lot of reasons. Again, question our assumptions. So why might people be losing weight? What's one assumption?
Illness.
Illness. That's one assumption. Yeah. All right, online. There's a harmful overassociation of skinniness with health. Yeah. And Josie was before that saying somebody could be in pain for, I'm assuming, for weeping. Yeah. Yeah, so we think that skinny equals healthy, but it could actually mean the opposite. It could mean that weight loss is from an illness. Yeah. It could also be grief. People, who are in grief don't take as much care of themselves, or their loss of appetite. There's many, many reasons, so many. Another one to avoid commenting on is, oh, you look tired. You look tired. Are you okay? Jenny said, oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So some of these, just pause and notice your noticings, question your assumptions, and don't jump in there quickly. Again, just extending the pause so that you can be more reflective, more self-aware. And then, we're talking about an unknown or invisible illness. So get clear about your motivations for wanting to know more. Why do you want to know more about what's going on with this person? Is it curiosity? Yeah, Carbon? Ah, yes, Josie adds, I noticed that you dropped a stone in the water. Is everything all right? Yeah, so people drop stones in the water for many reasons. They may or may not want to share about it. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that example. Yeah, so why do you want to know? And there's good reasons. You may be concerned for a person, you care about them, you want to offer support if you can. And that's a positive motivation. But if you notice that it's curiosity, question that. Yeah. Nosiness, Jasper said. Yeah. Do you need to know? Is it going to be helpful for you to know more? And then get clear about confidentiality. If you're asking someone to disclose their health details to you, are you going to keep it confidential? I mean, hopefully, yes. But get clear about, are you ready to hold that in confidence? If you're not, if you know that that's going to be super hard for you to hold in confidence, then, maybe don't ask. Yeah. And if you find out something and you think somebody else should know, like the pastoral care team, ask for permission. Is it okay with you if I share about this with Reverend Mary and the pastoral care team? Then reflect on what you can reasonably offer in the way of support. Maybe you reasonably can offer to drive them to their medical appointments, or to bring over meals, or to walk their dog for them, or clean their cat's litter box, or something truly practical. And maybe you can't. But it'll be really super helpful if you are at the point of offering help, if you have concrete examples, not just tell me if there's anything I can do. Instead, be really concrete. These are things I can do. Would those be helpful for you? And be okay if they say no. It's still fine for them to say no. And ask open-ended questions or invitations. So instead of, what are your exact symptoms? So instead, an open-ended question, what would you like me to know about you and your needs? Or if this is a group and you're wondering if it's accessible to everyone. Do you have any accessibility needs that the group could accommodate? Is our setup here working for everyone? Those are open-ended invitations for people to state their needs, but not prying about personal details that they may not want to share. Another way to do it would be to say, I care about you, and I'm here to support you if there's any way that that would be helpful. And that leaves it open that people can say, oh, thank you for caring about me, but I'm fine. And finally, be okay with them not sharing information. There's a lot of times that people don't want to talk about their health details with people, and that's okay. Everyone is allowed privacy. Any thoughts or examples anybody would want to lift up?
Well, that's all very helpful, and I appreciate going through all those steps. But my take on hearing them is back off and don't worry about people. And yet we're in a community, and sometimes people need to be worried about. And so I think even though there's things to be careful about, especially if we know somebody very well, I think it's important for us to be careful how we do it, but to allow them a chance to share that if they want to, because sometimes that's really what they want to do. But if they don't, that's fine. But just, anyhow, I just wanted to give that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, to be clear, you don't need to just back off. There's like a way of getting proximate with people that isn't like trapping them. So, get close in whatever way that means, whether that's an email or a text, but still be like leaving them space to leave if they want to. Yeah.
The part about being specific whenever you offer something is, I think, very helpful. Is there any way I can help, is putting a burden on them. But I also read recently a couple of places a suggestion that if you're really close with someone, if you really know them well, that sometimes just saying, I'm bringing over your favorite casserole at this date, then they don't have a chance to just, oh, pshaw, I don't need anything, blah, blah. I'm your friend, I love you, I'm doing this,
Yes, if you really know someone well, yes. That is great, but it does imply a level of intimacy that has already made space for that. Yeah. Carbon? I love the reflect on what you can reasonably offer. Yeah. It's a helpful step there. Anyone else?
This probably doesn't even pertain, but I got a ride here, and I thought they were coming in the forum. This is a really good forum, but I think I better go look for my ride.
A practical example of community care in action.
Exactly.
And the follow-up.
Exactly.
If you're stranded, come back and let us know.
I had a couple things I wanted to add regarding being in a community and caring for each other. If you know someone well, there can be a conversation that might begin with, I've noticed these things, and I care about you. Would you like to talk with me about them? And the answer might be no, but the answer might be, oh, I'm really glad you asked, right? So that could be a reasonable conversation because it's clear about, what you observed. It might be, in order to say those things, you have to think about what your assumptions are about what you've observed, and you're clear that it comes from a place of care for them. The other thing that happens is people sometimes come to me or the pastoral care team and say, I'm worried about so-and-so. Right? And so then it becomes, well, what do we know about that person? Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. And so then it might become I or someone from the pastoral care team will just call and say, just checking in to see how you are, right? So there's some other ways to get at that. So instead of the stepping away, it's the what does the toward look like and feel like in a way that isn't disempowering, but also expresses care. And then just a word about the pastoral care team. That team and I have done a lot of work in my time here about the boundaries of care and how we keep confidences. And if you ever chat with someone from the pastoral care team, what you're likely to hear from them is, I'd like to share that with Reverend Mary, is that okay? Because the assumption is, as an extension of the minister, the pastoral care team is going to share information with me. And in my time here, we did have one situation where someone said, no, I don't want you to talk to Reverend Mary. And looking into that, they were mad at me, and I didn't know that. So it gave us the opportunity for repair of a relationship that I didn't even know was strained, right? So there's lots of different bits of information that you can get from that conversation about sharing and confidentiality. So if you have other questions or comments about the pastoral care team and how they operate in this circle of care that we're creating, I'm happy to chat more about that.
Well, in the past, if somebody wanted to talk to me, the only thing I would say to them, and I don't know if this is the right thing, is that I'll listen, but it won't go any further, and I don't offer advice. I don't know if that's the right thing or not.
That can be the right thing, for sure. One thing I like to do is, ask, do you want to be listened to? Do you want advice? Or do you just want to vent? And knowing what mindset people are in, do you want to be listened to and comforted? Do you want me to offer you advice? Or do you just want a safe place to just be angry about this right now? And depending on whether you're ready to hold space for all of those things, you don't have to offer all three. You could say, do you want any advice or do you just want me to listen? Yeah. So I also want to talk about when we do know that a person is ill or has mental or physical health challenges. So Carbon, if I could have my next slide list there. So if a person does share, and so you do know that there is something going on with them, no worries. It's very similar at the beginning as if you don't know for sure whether something's going on. Again, it's that self-awareness check-in. So notice, know your own tendencies and notice what you're noticing. Question your assumptions. So if somebody has shared about their health, what do you immediately have a reaction to? If somebody shares that they are very depressed, but you've had a history of a family member who had severe depression, you may have an immediate reaction that is more about what went on with your family member than it is about this person. And just notice that. Notice that. And question your assumptions that you're bringing to this new situation. And then this one is pretty important. So some of the things that we may do when we find out that a person is sick, we may minimize, that it's not really that bad. I have a type of arthritis, and I get this one a lot. So I find my arthritis is fairly debilitating in my life, but I sometimes get the reaction of everybody gets arthritis, it's no big deal. Which is a minimizing, right? Or rationalizing. So, a person may be struggling with something, physical or mental, and you may try to rationalize it. Like, if we can just understand this, then it won't be so scary. So let's just try to get super logical and scientific about this thing and the course of treatment. And that's a way of avoiding the feelings, because we get all up in our heads, and we can escape from hard feelings that way. Another one is comparisons. So, you might find out that somebody's sick and you're like, oh, well, I know somebody else who's even more sick, right? Oh yeah, or I know just what you're going through. Yes, yeah, the making it personal to yourself. Yeah. And then the last one is doom. So avoiding doom, oh my gosh, I don't know how you can possibly live like this. I mean, that's also not helpful, right? So these are some things to notice and seek to avoid. And then we get back to offering support. So reflect on what you can reasonably offer in the way of support, and offer what is reasonable for you. Get consent before you share stories or advice. And this is your own stories too. So, is it okay if I tell you a story about something similar that happened to me? One thing that also happens when people disclose a health situation or experience is that a lot of people don't ever get a chance to talk about them. And so you hear that somebody else has a thing, and you're like, oh, I also had a... This is really, really true with fertility issues. We don't tend to talk about infertility and miscarriage in our society. You find out a person had a miscarriage, suddenly everybody is telling them their miscarriage stories. And while we do need spaces for collective grief, the person who is just fresh into grief doesn't have the capacity to hold everyone's grief. So the asking consent before you share stories or advice, are they ready for that? Do they want that? And then open-ended supportive statements. That sounds hard. I'm sorry you're going through this. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Don't have to have brilliant advice. You just have to have a caring heart and let them know that you have a caring heart for them. Offer the support that you have to give, and then don't forget and move on quickly. Most of these things are long-term and chronic. It's not like you had a cold last week and now you're all better. So don't just treat it like it's a one and done and now, because people who have really long-term chronic things can end up feeling forgotten. So remember to come back around again. Comments? Yes.
As a divorce lawyer for 30-some years, I can also say that when people tell you about their divorce issues or stories, and especially about what's going on with the other person, avoid that doom thing, because everybody's story is different. Everybody's experience of the same story is a whole different thing than it was for the other person. So it's a really tough time for folks, and I hear a lot of people telling me about things that they've heard from other folks that were very unhelpful. So just, that's one where this is really pertinent.
Carbon, anything online? Nope, okay. All right, well, we're gonna move on now to another hard thing, death and grief.
From illness to death. So this, when we are confronted with death, it could be something that is expected, meaning someone has been in an illness or had an illness over time, and death is kind of, we know it's coming, maybe not when. Or the other is an unexpected death, an accident, something like that. And so again, you're going to hear some common threads here. First of all, know yourself. What's your tendency here when there's a death? Our cultural tendency is to avoid, right? It's to back away, to minimize. It's scary, it's unknown, we don't want to address it. And then also to recognize that when someone has suffered a loss and is grieving, it activates their nervous system, and that means it can activate our nervous system when we're around them. And grief is exhausting. It's exhausting to our brains and to our bodies. And so someone who is grieving may not be processing very well or very clearly. And that's not because anything is wrong with them other than they are grieving, which is a normal and natural thing, and it will likely get better over time. It's just where they are right then. And so one of the real tragedies of grief and loss in our culture, I think, is right at the time when someone has suffered an incredible loss, we ask them to do 18 million administrative things, right? At a time when their brains are not functioning all that great and their heart is broken. So we'll talk a bit about how we can help support somebody in those situations. The other thing to remember when facing a death is when we suffer a loss, we have lost control. We don't have control over how long someone lives, whether they have an illness, whether that illness leads to death. We certainly don't have control over an accident. And so we don't like to not be in control all that much. It's hard to face that there are things in life that we can't control. And so when we offer support and comfort around a death, one of the things to keep in mind is to offer that person as much agency as possible, so that they can control as much as possible with as much support as they want. They get to decide because they've just had control taken away from them. How can we help them feel empowered to make decisions and the decisions that need to be made? So one of the first things to think about is your own preparation. If you know you're going to engage with someone who suffered a loss, are you ready for that? So an example of this is we had a loss in the congregation that I learned about from someone else. And it was under circumstances very similar to a loss that I had in my family. And as soon as I heard about it, my nervous system was activated. And before I could call that person, I needed to have a good cry first. I needed to work through my own remembering and experience of that loss so that I could be okay in order to be present for this other person who needed their minister right then, right? So there was preparation that I did to be ready to be with them. And then once again, reflect on what you can reasonably do and offer. And again, it's specific things. You might offer meals, you might offer rides. If you have particular knowledge about something, you might offer to help with that. Can I call the funeral home and figure out what options you might have for cremation? Do you need help with that? I have some experience with Social Security. Can I find out how what you might do in order to notify them of the death? Can I help you figure out how to get death certificates? I mean, there's a ton of administrative stuff that people need. Do you feel like you can help with research and the legwork to help that person do what they need to do? And once again, let our care include giving space and giving them control and agency. So not so many questions that it's overwhelming, but really what is it that you would like me to know about how you are and how can I be most helpful to you? This is what I feel like I can help with. On the next slide, again, it's asking for consent before you share, leaping into a story. Oh, I'm sorry for your loss. Let me tell you the story about when so-and-so, did this. And there will be a time for sharing memories. It might not be right in that moment. Also, be ready for a no. If you say, would you like to hear the story about this? They might say, not right now. And then you have to be ready to accept that no. And it's the same with touch. Can I give you a hug? No, thank you. Okay. You have to be ready to step back, right? And so once again, it's knowing what's our need here. You might need a hug. Go ask somebody else for a hug. They might not need a hug. And so that's the ring theory again, right? If you need a hug and they don't, go find somebody else to give you a hug. Because of course you might need a hug, but it might not be them. It might not need to be them. So some things you can say. I'm sorry. I'm sad to hear about your loss. I'm here for you. I care about you. I'm at a loss for words, and I just want you to know I care about you. Just be real about that. And I'm glad to see you. Just a human connection between people. You can listen, like you said, Dodd, and just be with them. You don't have to say anything or do anything, just be. You might be with tears, you might be with their sadness, with their other feelings. Often when there's been a long illness, there can be really complicated feelings. And so if someone comes forward with, oh my gosh, that must be terrible, what can happen for the person is they might actually be feeling some relief that the person isn't in pain anymore. And it's really complicated when someone has had a long illness. There is loss, of course. There might be relief. There might be all kinds of other feelings there. And so if you come forward with naming feelings for that person, it may or may not capture what they're really feeling. Let them take the lead on that. You can reflect the intensity of the feeling. So on the next slide, Carbon, you might say, that sounds really intense. Just a statement of fact, that sounds really intense. It allows them to say yep or no, not quite so much, or it's been worse or something like that. You can acknowledge the overwhelm. Oh my gosh, that sounds like a lot for you to have to do right now. And then you can offer with rituals of remembering and honoring their life. When we have a celebration of life here, there are some teams that help with that, with the reception, and folks that help with planning the ritual. It's usually the case that I will ask someone, do you have some folks you can bring with you when we talk about what you would like the service to be? So that those folks can help with the list of things that are going to need to be done. And so if that's something that you feel like you can help with, offer that to someone. Would you like me to meet with you with Reverend Mary? Would you like me to help with the memorials reception team? Would you like me to support you in some other way? And if you can't offer that support, be real about that for yourself and for them. This is part of the keeping boundaries, so that when you do offer, people know that you're offering genuinely, and you can do that. And if you can't, you can say, I'm really sorry, I can't help you with that. Can I help you find someone who can? Right? That's all you have to say. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to give a reason. It's just that you can't, and can you help them find someone who can? If that's something you can actually do. If not, then you just can't, right? And then again, as Reverend Sara said, don't disappear. It often happens when there's a loss that there's a restructuring of someone's life. Who's going to be my friend now? If it's a partnership, if there were friends that you had with your partner that you've lost, are they still your friends? Are they still going to show up? And so don't disappear, keep in touch. And what I find sometimes helpful is to explicitly talk with the person about what would be helpful. Would you like me to give you a call again next week? Would you like me to give you a call tomorrow? Would you like me to check in a few weeks? Do you like a text? Do you want social media? There's lots of ways to keep connected these days, and so negotiate what would feel supportive to them. Any questions about that, or any concerns or scenarios? Are there things that you've encountered that you want to chat about?
This is all very helpful. And one of the things that I wanted to add is that often the person who survives has spent months or years providing careful service to the person that died. And many times people, whenever they talk to that person, they're asking about how's the person who's dying doing, not how are you doing, how are you handling that. And it's important to realize that that person needs a lot of support as well. So, anyhow.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much for adding that. When I meet with people who are grieving, one of the things I ask them is, are you sleeping? Because they're probably exhausted, and if they're not sleeping, then they're not going to heal.
I just want to add that sometimes in the case of a long illness, when the person finally dies, the person does feel a sense of relief because they've already grieved all along, because they knew the loss was coming.
Exactly.
Didn't hear? I'll repeat. So sometimes in the case of a long illness, the person may feel a sense of relief because they've been grieving all the way along. And to add on to that, they also may feel guilty about that sense of relief. Yeah.
There's a complexity to grief. I've heard people say grief isn't a feeling, it's a constellation.
I have an interesting scenario. There was a person in my life who was divorced from her husband, and the divorce was really nasty. And then the husband, well, he was an ex-husband at that point, died. And then they had this celebration of life. And everybody was saying all these wonderful things. And she was looking worse and worse and worse. And finally, I'm glad, I don't know what I said to her, but we were very close. And she goes, everybody is seeing him this way. How come I couldn't see him this way? And I was like, oh, wow, that must be really tough. Yeah, so that there's interesting things that can happen.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so, I just want to commend you, Drew, for having an open mind and heart to be able to even invite your friend into that conversation. Because imagine how hard to say, I couldn't see him that way, the way that these other people. You're right.
We still have that type of relationship.
Right. You have that type of relationship.
And I'm just so glad I was there and I was there to be able to do that.
That's right. So kudos to you for, it sounds like you entered with some curiosity in your friendship to be able to just allow for this really hard thing to be said and then to be with that in a way that was supportive of your friend. Absolutely. Other situations or things you want to share from your own experience around a death?
I've been sitting here listening to this, and I think one of the things that has just struck me is I think sometimes, and I'm thinking about myself, like even I think I know myself and how I am, and other people know how I am and how I handle difficult things. And I find myself in a situation where I'm surprised at how I'm handling a difficult thing. And so just to kind of another assumption not to make, I guess, about, oh, that person's got lots of friends, or they deal with loss this way, or to not, grief is such a strange thing that you can't make any assumptions like that. I don't know what the answer is, but.
Right. Thank you for saying that, Jasper, because things change, right? And our own capacity to be with someone who is in pain changes day to day or even hour to hour. On the Sunday after we bombed Iraq, the feel of the congregation that day was really different than other Sundays. Folks were hurting and grieving and worried and afraid. And so everybody's capacity, including mine, to be with each other and to process what was happening was really different than it was today when it felt really, so we change over time, and what we might have experienced last time might be really different this time, and the circumstances might be different. Yeah, thank you. Anything else that, yeah, Sarah?
I was just going to ask Carbon, are there any online? Nope, okay.
So I think you heard some common threads in response, right? Know yourself, open-ended questions, offer what you can, be as concrete as possible. Be willing to not say anything or do anything and simply be with someone. And don't disappear. We continue to be in community. So that could be supporting overwhelmed parents, because we have lots of those right now. It could be in situations of separation and divorce, which is its own kind of loss and grief, or any other situations, losing a job, losing a pet, all the things that are happening. So is there anything else that you'd like to say or bring into this space before we offer gratitude and extinguish our chalice? Anything online, Carbon? I want to thank you for showing up. These are hard things, and we labeled them that way for a reason, and that you were willing to be here and be here for each other and engage in this kind of learning and reflection is just really powerful. So thank you for that. So we'll extinguish our chalice with a prayer from Reverend Michelle Collins. Ground of all being, in this room and beyond it, we are learning to see each other. Not the quick assessments, not the categories, but the full, complicated truth of each and every life. Help us to offer the gift of undivided presence, to listen without planning or reply, to make space for stories that take time to unfold, to ask who is missing from here and why. When we accompany those in pain, keep us from the tyranny of fixing. Teach us to stay while the crisis passes by, to show up in the unglamorous middle. May we become communities where every voice matters, where margins become centers, and where attention itself is love made visible. Thank you all.